Hello, and good evening, everyone. I'm Stephanie Agar, the Membership Events Manager, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to tonight's talk, the latest in our series of fashion and fiction events with Rosie Goldsmith. British-Turkish novelist and activist Elif Shafak is a passionate advocate for women's rights, LGBTQ community, and freedom of speech, and those are themes that are woven through her latest work and her intricately told stories, her latest work including the very lyrical 10 minutes and 38 seconds in this strange world. I wanted to make sure I got the title right. I read it end to end, but wanted to make sure that I named it right. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous book, which I know we'll hear more about this evening. In 2017, she was named by Politico as one of the 12 people who would make the world better. So we are fortunate to have us here with us tonight. We'll hear more about making the world better, I think, as well. And Elif is joined this evening by Rosie Goldsmith, whose fashion and fiction series we have been extremely fortunate to host over the past few years. So I am very much looking forward to this one, as I know you are. So on that note, please join me in welcoming Elif Shafak and Rosie Goldsmith to the stage.
We're blessed. And also that amazing cover.
Yeah, the cover is, I like
incredible.
It very much. Yeah.
It looks wonderful, sort of blown up. I think we should make that into a dress fabric. I suddenly thought that would be just wonderful.
It also very much reminds me of Istanbul. I don't know, the colors, the shades, yeah.
But Elif, welcome to the V&A.
Thank you.
It's your first time here, and I'm speaking in this lecture hall, and I can't believe we've waited so long to invite you here, and then to talk about this incredible book. It's been out a few weeks. I don't know how many of you have read it already. Let's have a look. A few. Well, it's not actually a spoiler to say that the main character is dead and dies right at the beginning. But this extraordinary book, which has been so fabulously reviewed and so on, and is really magnificently written. Let us talk a little bit about the book. Can you tell us about Layla and the whole idea of this book?
Thank you
10
so
seconds, 10 minutes, 38 seconds.
Thank you, dear Rosie. I became very interested in this series of scientific studies that show after the moment of death, after the heart has stopped beating, the human brain continues to work for another few minutes. Particularly in Canada, doctors in an intensive care unit have observed persistent brain activity in dead people. And what they found out was that activity went on for about 10 minutes. And I added my own 38 seconds to that. But basically, I think as a storyteller, as a fiction writer, to me that was incredibly interesting. And I also found out that the part of our brain that is in charge of long-term memory is the last bit to shut down. So if that is the case, what do we remember? Do we remember the good things or the bad things? And as Rosie said, right at the very beginning of the novel, we do know that the main character is dead. Actually, the first words in the novel are the end. So she's a sex worker in Istanbul. She has been brutally killed and dumped in a garbage bin. And this is actually a real event that happened in Istanbul. A transgender sex worker had been killed and dumped in a garbage can on the outskirts of the city, as if like the final insult. And I've never forgotten that. So when I was writing, I remembered that incident. Right away we know she's dead, but her brain is still functioning, working. And as Layla, as Tequila Layla, she remembers her past minute by minute by minute. We travel to her story, but also the story of a country and the story of a region in a way, but always told through the eyes of outcasts.
Through the eyes of outcasts, exactly. I mean, the whole novel really is, it champions the outcast and makes us think about all those people we don't often consider. Yeah. And all her friends are outcasts, they are all undesirables, all those words that we all use as euphemisms for people who are different, who have problems. Yeah. And they are never accepted in society. And Layla is a wonderful example of somebody who, in spite of all the terrible, awful things that happened to her, she transcends that. And it's 5 decades of her life. Yeah. But she's dead. Yes. So you use this this framework to so 10 minutes, 10 chapters, with sub-chapters and super-chapters, mind, body, soul. It's such a clever, clever structure. If you've read it, you'll know that this works beautifully to contain this massive story. It's a teeming story, so it's very good that it's actually got this structure to keep it in. Then it goes back into 10 main periods of her life.
Right.
So when Layla she's born in 1947
Right.
in a village
Yeah.
in eastern Turkey.
Yeah.
Tell us about Layla as a child.
So she's born actually on the other end of Turkey, in a city called Van, just the border with Russia. And it's a small town, as you said, not a big liberal urban city at all. And her family goes through lots of journeys. I should tell you right away, that is not a spoiler either. It is a polygamous family. So her father has 2 wives. And she grows up with these 2 women in the house. And that leaves an impact on her as well. And the father, over the years, becomes increasingly religious. And his notion of religion is centered on fear, around fear. So it's very much about sin, haram, halal, all these, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. It is not an understanding of religion that revolves around love. And that too has an impact on her as a woman, growing up in such a conservative, ultra-conservative, very rigid environment. Her body is changing, she wants to dress up. Meanwhile, the world is changing. Let us not forget, these are the years when Kennedy has been assassinated, America is changing, the world is changing. So there's always that, the background, the political background was also important to me. But I think that the main question as a writer is, how does a human being feel at a moment when everything is changing, when there's a big political, economic, and social turbulence? A young woman, what are the feelings that she might be going through? I wanted to capture that complexity, but always through details like senses, smells. So it's, in that sense, the sensuality was important for me.
It's very, very evocative because all her memories across the 10 chapters, the 10 minutes, are triggered by the senses. So you have the coffee, you have the cardamom coffee, you have the lemon and the sugar. And you have that wonderful scene where women, these Muslim women in the village, they lead covered lives, they're covered most of the time. And then when they're alone amongst themselves, they strip off and they wax their legs with this lemon and sugar, and they are just uproarious and bawdy, and they let themselves go.
But these are the things I have observed in Turkey, and I was raised, maybe I should tell right away, I was raised by 2 women, my mother and my grandmother. And they were very different. My mom is very westernized, very well educated, very secular, urban, rational. And grandma would tick off all the other boxes. So she's more Eastern, very irrational, very spiritual, very superstitious as well, but wise in her own way. And I've seen these women who are in the public space, very reserved because of the way they have been raised, because of the things we tell them as women. You should be careful when you sit down, make sure, how you keep your legs, how you keep your body language. But then we're in the company of each other, they're much more relaxed. And to me, it left an impact as a child, observing that difference between who we are as women in the public space and who we become in the private space among friends. That contrast is very visible in extremely patriarchal settings.
Now, there are so many issues about women that you explore, which you do in all your novels, and you really don't shy away from addressing the difficult issues as well. I mean, there's a substantial amount about mental illness, because Layla's mother, Binaz, has a breakdown. And I thought that was also very poignant and very brave as well, because this is, again, behind the walls of these women's lives. And then there's sex abuse and all these other issues, which of course isn't easy for you, because you are currently being investigated by the Turkish government and you've had problems before. Do you never, ever want to give up describing these difficult issues for women and people generally? I mean, it's all about human rights in the end.
I think the key is, I am a novelist, I'm a fiction writer. That's what I am primarily. And for me, the space of fiction is a democratic space. Even if I try to be the dictator and try to dictate the characters and tell them what they should do and what they shouldn't do, or whether they should touch upon those subjects or not go in that path, they wouldn't listen to me, you know?
I don't think I've ever heard you being called a dictator before, but
for a writer,
probably the opposite.
So I think there has to be democracy in the world of fiction, by which I mean you need to respect the story, the characters, the flow, the language. Sometimes as a fiction writer, you place a word there because the previous word wants to be accompanied by that word. So it's a much more egalitarian space. Only when I finished a novel and I hand it to my editor, then I start to worry and I'm like, oh my God, what are people going to say? But by then it's too late because the novel is born and is independent. So I guess all I'm trying to say is, as novelists, we do not control the texts and we follow the story, we follow the characters. That's how I like to write. That said, there are issues that I care about, and I think that's almost like an undercurrent in all my books. I believe storytellers are not only interested in stories, but also silences, the things we cannot talk about easily, including taboos, political taboos, cultural taboos, and sometimes sexual taboos. So there's a part of me that wants to say, why is it that we can't talk about this issue? Can we please open it up, you know, and create an open space where we can have a diversity of opinions and then always leave the answers to the reader. So that's where I make a distinction. I don't think a novelist should try to dictate the answers. I don't like it when novelists try to preach or teach anything, but I think it's a novelist's job to ask questions, simple but sometimes difficult questions.
But additionally, you are an academic and you are a well-known speaker, public speaker as well, and champion human rights and feminism and so many important issues in our society for which we admire you very, very much indeed. So these things do come together in some way. You're not, in speech, just a novelist. So when people do read your novels, I'm sure they're also thinking of all the other aspects of your life as well.
Sure, but for me, I think the novel is about anything and everything. You know, a novelist should have curiosity, an endless curiosity. So I don't believe that fiction writers should only be reading or mainly be reading fiction. Not at all. I think our reading list should be very eclectic. And to me, it's much more interesting, much more fascinating when a novelist reads neuroscience, or when a scientist reads poetry, or when a political scientist follows cinema very closely. When we respond to things outside our domain, how do we respond to that kind of knowledge? Those conversations, those interdisciplinary conversations, in my opinion, are much more intriguing. They're better for the intellect, they're better for the soul. And to be honest, there's a question I keep asking myself. How is it possible that so many experts kept getting so many things wrong? You know, imagine over the decades, particularly since late 1990s onwards, imagine the Euro crisis, the financial crisis, all the way up to Brexit vote and Trump's election. Many international experts, many financial experts, very smart people, very focused people, they kept getting things wrong, including the Arab Spring, including what was happening in the Middle East. And I think part of the reason is because everybody is so atomized. Everybody is so disconnected. We know our field, we go deep into our fields, but we don't have enough conversations across disciplines, between cultures, among different backgrounds. That is what we're lacking. So we're lacking the connections. And I think intellect always grows through connections. That's why as a novelist, if I'm interested in, also depends on the story I'm covering. You know, for one of my novels, The Flea Palace, I had to read endlessly about insects. You know, for maybe another book.
I definitely wouldn't have written a novel.
So it's wherever the story takes you, you read on that subject. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned this idea of, you know, us becoming very focused and, in a way, forgetting our multiplicities. And I know that multiple identities and all these other non-tribal aspects of life, where you're trying to make us think more broadly and more imaginatively about our own lives, and in many ways to belong more to a community. And I wonder if you think about Layla, think about the book. and her identity. Well, she is many, many different things as well. It's actually quite hard to pin her down.
Yes.
And over the 5 decades of her story, which is 5 decades of Turkish history, 5 decades of international history. I mean, there's an incredible amount in this very sort of slim novel. We get to see the many different sides of Layla.
Yeah. I think for me, it was important to remind myself, and perhaps the reader as well, she is certainly disempowered, and these are outcasts. These are people who have been pushed to the periphery of the society, looked down upon, mistreated, and they had to face a lot of discrimination. But that doesn't mean they are weak. That doesn't mean they're victims. You know, they have their strength, they have their resilience. I wanted to resist that simplification. Also, maybe I need to share this. There's an actual place in Istanbul. It's called the Cemetery of the Companionless.
And the Cemetery of the Companionless.
Yes.
Like, what is that in Turkish?
Yeah.
What is that?
Kimsesiz. You know, if you don't have anyone, you bury it there. But of course, the paradox is many of these people, they were not companionless. They had friends. They had someone in life. So we forget that. These are people, most of them are people who have been rejected by their families. So according to the law, if the family rejects the body ends up in that cemetery. And unlike any other graveyard, there are no names there, no surnames, only numbers. Most of the graves have only numbers. And when you research the people who are buried there, and it's very easy for them to be erased, because there's nothing personal that indicates who is buried there. But when you research more thoroughly, what I found out was many of them are LGBT members, community. There are lots of people who have died of AIDS throughout 1980s, 1990s. There are many sex workers there, also abandoned babies who have been found on the streets, and the growing number of refugees. We always read about refugees who drown while they're trying to cross to Europe. Where are all these bodies taken? They're taken to that cemetery. So it's a very strange place where an Afghan or a Syrian refugee might be buried next to a Turkish sex worker, next to an abandoned baby, and all of them are turned into numbers. And I think I wanted to pick at least one of those numbers and give it a name, give it a story, give it an individuality, and reverse that process. I sincerely believe literature has to rehumanize people who have been dehumanized. And I wanted to say these people are not companionless. That's why one of the central emphasis, I think, in the book is on friendships. In many ways, this is a novel that deals with heavy subjects, but I really think it's a life-affirming book that celebrates diversity, but it also celebrates friendships. Because I think, particularly in undemocratic societies, where the public space is quite intolerant, friendships matter even more, and it's thanks to friendships that many people find the courage and the strength to go on.
And Layla's friends are absolutely marvellous. They're these 5 friends. Numbers, by the way, will become very important, as you'll see as you read the novel. There's significance in all of the numbers. So she has 5 friends. I think of them as the famous 5. There's a dwarf, and there's a trans friend, and there's an oversized singer, and they're all very distinctive and wonderful characters. And as you say, she develops this family of friends. She's abandoned by her own family, or she abandons her own family. She leaves her family in the village. She goes to the city and tries to find a life in Istanbul, which she had dreamed about.
Yes.
And it's also about Istanbul.
Definitely, of course. Because,
there's a lot. You've got whole chapters about Istanbul.
Yes.
You write wonderfully.
Because I think Istanbul is not a passive, scenery or a background decor. I think Istanbul has a very strong personality. I always think of Istanbul as a she city, as a feminine city. And maybe it's, as a woman writer, it's important for me to remember that tradition that goes all the way back to not only Turkish literature, but also to Ottoman literature and then to Byzantium, when Istanbul was always depicted as a woman, either through goddesses or empresses, or in the minds of Ottoman poets, again, it was a female city, but we have forgotten that tradition. And today, of course, when you walk around the city, most of the streets belong to men, particularly after certain hours. Public squares belong to men. The tea houses, the coffee houses, the mosques mostly belong to men. So maybe there's a part of me that also wants to resist that and say we need to reclaim the urban space as women, and also we need to remember that the soul of this city was feminine.
In the period you're describing, which is basically the Cold War period leading up to the fall of the Berlin Wall, in international terms, I mean, but it's all seen from Turkey's point of view. Turkey itself went through extraordinary changes. It went through a huge modernization period as well. When you look at that period now, do you think Turkey is going backwards? As far as the characters in this book,
Yeah.
you know, how would they be coping today?
Yeah, it ends in 1990, the story. But I'm sure there are people in the audience who have been to Turkey or who have been following everything that's happening in Turkey. And there is no doubt in my mind that the country as a whole has been going backwards as the government became more authoritarian. So what happened was we became more nationalistic. Religious fundamentalism also increased. When authoritarianism increases, toxic politics increases. But I think when that happens, in other words, when countries go backwards instead of going forwards, I honestly think women should be more aware and should be more alert, because one of the first things that will be curtailed will be women's rights and also minority rights. So that's where we are right now. But as I'm saying this, I also want to share with you that this is an incredibly complex country. And so there's also a very amazing civil society in Turkey, despite everything, a very complex, multi-layered society. And there are many beautiful people in Turkey who believe in democracy, who see themselves as global souls. So if you speak with the people, with women, with minorities, with young people, with students, you will feel more optimistic about the country. But if you focus on the politics of the country and its politicians, I think you'll feel very depressed. I mean, I do feel very demoralized when I look at how politics is evolving in Turkey. But I also try not to forget ever that the people, and that's the tragedy perhaps, the people are ahead of their governments.
This event is actually called Fashion and Fiction. Now, this is going to scare Elif enormously. She does. We don't. She and I always joke about clothes, but normally because I wear red and she wears black. But we'll get onto that eventually. But more importantly, I think is interestingly, you do write a lot about clothing, and as not in any artificial way as a form of identity for people, but it is obviously, in Layla's case, it is very much she changes what she wears according to who she is, as we all do, I think. But there is that wonderful scene when she's a child and she loves belly dancing. And if you think later what that means, because Layla is, of course, suppressed by her own father, who becomes quite a devout Muslim, and is not able to express that freedom, that abandon of the belly dancing. And she wants to be able to wear her sequined belly dancing dress underneath her Muslim clothes. So this is also an opportunity for you to talk about Muslim dress, I think, and how women dress in Turkey.
Yes, I appreciate the question very much. On the other hand, I find it difficult to generalize because, I mean, across the Muslim world, there are so many different traditions, and there always have been. Imagine, in Turkish, I have around 6 or 7 different words to designate the headscarf. And each and every one of them is different. But when I translate that complexity into English, I have only one word. So there are important details. Perhaps one of the things that left an impact on me, and I'm endlessly curious about fabrics, colors, even though you might not guess when you look at the way I dress up, I really am interested in the beauty of clothing and fashion. I admire it, I just lack it, and when I lack it, maybe I admire it even more. So I'm curious. But perhaps one of the things that left an impact on me was in my childhood, I was born in France. And shortly afterwards, my parents got separated, and my mother brought me to Turkey. Because for Mom, Turkey was motherland. For me, it was a new country to discover. And we came to a very conservative neighborhood in Ankara, to my maternal grandmother's house. Afterwards, around the time I was 10 years old, my mother became a diplomat, and she and I, we traveled again, this time from Ankara to Madrid, Spain. And I've never forgotten my shock in Madrid was related to colors, the colors that women could wear, particularly women who were slightly older, because I'd never seen that. The neighborhood that I had known was mostly, older women had to wear older colors, or maybe more dull colors. I never wear, for instance, lipstick. I'd never seen an old grandmother, let's say, with makeup. And then when you see that in a country like Spain, I loved it. To me, it felt very liberating that women could wear all kinds of colors and be happy with their makeup. So I've never forgotten. It was almost like a shift because Ankara in late 1970s, the Ankara that I remember, it was mostly shades of gray and browns. You would look at the people walking on the streets. There weren't too many bright colors in terms of what people wore. Whereas Madrid in early 1980s was teeming with colors. So I do pay attention to these things.
You are Muslim. Do you ever wear a headscarf?
Maybe I have to clarify. Of course, I've grown up in this culture. I am not a believer. I am someone who is interested in faith, but I have too much doubt to become a believer. So, and I wrote about this in The Three Daughters of Eve.
Which is actually probably the most significant book if we are talking about Muslim women,
Yes.
Three Daughters of Eve,
Yeah.
because there are three different types of women there, three different types of Muslim women.
True. Three different types, or three women, let's
Three
say,
women,
because there's more variety, diversity, certainly. But in that novel, there's a British-Iranian girl called Shirin, and she's the child of exiled parents. She's critical of all religions. She's an atheist. There's Mona, who wears a headscarf, and she complains about Islamophobia because she experiences this almost on a daily basis. And then there's Piri, the Turkish girl, who has questions about everything and anything. And jokingly, they call themselves the sinner, the believer, and the confused. And the novel mostly focuses on the journey of the confused one. Now, coming back to my story, perhaps it's relevant because I like confusion. I don't like certainty much. So maybe my issue with people who are extremely or who are very certain of their religiosity is that they want to get rid of doubt. And I think faith without doubt is a dogma, and dogmas are very dangerous. On the other hand, people who are extremely certain of their atheism, I think they want to get rid of faith. But faith is an interesting concept, and faith can also be a secular concept. So why are you trying to get rid of it? I think when you write a novel without knowing whether you're going to succeed or not, it's an act of faith. When you move to another country without knowing whether you're going to be happy there, it's an act of faith. When you fall in love with someone, it's an act of faith. So there are all these secular acts of faith that we can reclaim. In a nutshell, I think rather than people who are sure of their certainties, I feel closer to agnostics. And I feel closer to mystics who have always been a bit of misfits. Heterodox mystics who walked a very fine line between faith and doubt, asking questions, daring to ask questions. But for me, the most important thing is to say, I haven't found the answers yet. The journey goes on.
So even this idea of women wearing a particular kind of dress or religious coded dress is not something you would approve of because, or what do you think about that?
I do not judge people like that. Personally, as I said, because I'm not religious and I do make a distinction between religiosity and spirituality, I don't feel close to collectivistic identities of any kind. I don't like it when collectivistic identities erase our individuality. For me, those individual journeys are very important. So organized religions, I don't find it close to my heart, the way they divide humanity between us versus them and assume that us is closer to God than them. That's not close to my heart. But I'm interested in personal spiritual journeys. And those journeys are as unique as our fingerprints. You know, you might start as a Buddhist, you might end up as a Jewish mystic. Who am I to judge? You know, that's your journey. Or you might do the opposite journey. Again, who am I to judge? So those are very unique.
But how do you fight the growing conservatism in general life with a small c? I mean, it's very difficult to be an individual in society today.
That's
and I suppose what we're doing with clothing, to a large degree, is asserting our individuality.
That's exactly the thing. You know, it's very difficult to be an individual and to remain an individual. And I think it's even harder for women to remain an individual. So when I used to teach at Middle East Technical University, back then, there was a headscarf ban in Turkey. And I remember it very clearly because many young women wearing headscarves were stopped at the gates of the university and not allowed in. And I've always been very critical of that ban. That doesn't mean I'm religious, you know, but I can also defend the freedoms of people who are different than me. That is, in my opinion, the democratic space. And also as a feminist, I would rather women come and have education into the public space rather than being pushed back into the private space. However, I'm also critical when any kind of dress or dress code is being imposed from above by the state, such as in Iran, such as in fundamentalist societies. Again, the individuality is erased. Of course, I'm also very critical of that. So we can have a nuanced approach to this debate, but unfortunately, we're living in an age when we're losing nuances. None of us, whatever our dress, whether we like red or black, whether we wear a headscarf or not, we have no right to impose our way on other people. We have no right to impose our way on younger people, but most importantly, the state has no right to impose the headscarf, which is happening all across the Middle East, on women and judging women's modesty on how they dress up. So to me, this is heartbreaking. And one of the things that I find very sad is when I see women themselves divided along dress codes. If we remain divided, the only thing that benefits from that is patriarchy itself. So of course, I defend women's liberties, women's freedoms, but I'm also longing for the kind of sisterhood that is able to bring different women from different backgrounds together. And for us to be able to do that, we need to go beyond the city centers and also bring on board women who might come from more conservative backgrounds, from the countryside, rural areas, and show what we have in common. If we can have that kind of a strong women's movement, patriarchy will be weaker. Otherwise, patriarchy will be stronger if women are divided.
There are so many times in this I just want to clap. But I think let's give her one clap now. Just with your It's very, very moving and incredibly important that you say these things. And I'm going to sort of bring you up to some another fashion-related, or it's called fashion and fiction, but it's costume basically, and how you describe costume, how you regard it yourself, because we've never talked about this before. And I know that you and I joke about you always wear black and I always wear red, which is pretty much the case. But we are in that way creating our own identities as well. And I remember you said this morning you looked in your wardrobe because you knew you were going to be interviewed by me, and you tried to find something red, and you didn't find anything. You don't possess anything red. When you did get up this morning, how did you think about how you were going to get dressed? Do you think about it?
I don't think about that much.
Right, we're getting down to basics now.
However,
I've always wanted to ask you that.
If I can be perfectly honest, it also depends on whether I have this pendulum. If I'm writing a novel, I'm inside the novel. And then I don't want to go, for instance, I don't go to a hairdresser until the novel is over, and then I cut my own hair, and then because I make a mess out of that, by the end of when the novel is done, I go to a hairdresser, and usually hairdressers, they throw a fit, because when they see what I have done, I can't explain it to them, and I really have a hard time. But when you are writing a novel, you want to stay in that world. when the book is over, it's different. The energy is completely different, because then you come into the public space. Then actually I might be very interested in dressing up more carefully, colors. I do try to introduce more colors now. So there's a little bit of more color in my wardrobe, although still black, I think, is the predominant color. But it really depends on where you are, whether you're in the middle of writing fiction or whether you are done with the book. I think as novelists, when we've finished a book, we become more normal, more social human beings. But otherwise, I really am an introvert, and I'd rather stay in that world. So it's a challenge for me to speak in the public space. But I've always believed that we need to go through this challenge, particularly as women. And if I may add this, I go to many schools. I used to go to many schools in Turkey to give talks. And one thing that's stayed with me very vividly is when you talk to younger students, 7-year-old, 8-year-old children, it really is amazing to see how much chutzpah they have, how much creativity and confidence. And girls at that age are even more creative, not creative, I take it back, but perhaps confident than boys. And when you ask them, is there anyone in this room who would like to become a fashion designer someday? So many hands go up, or poet someday, again. But then if you go and visit high schools, everything has changed, right? Now nobody wants to be an artist. Now nobody wants to write novels or poetry or have that artistic side of life. And perhaps equally important is the fact that now girls are timid. So if you talk to 14-year-old, 15-year-old girls, teenagers, as if they weren't the same children, something has gone completely wrong. And because through years of social life, through family, education, neighborhood, we teach them just to blend in. Don't stand out. Whatever you wear, make sure you do not stand out. Just be normal. And that slowly drains our energy. It just drains our confidence.
You're talking about colour before, and I mean we've both sort of obviously been astonished by the beauties of the blues and so on too. Yeah. But you do wear black. Now black is also you do wear other colours, I know, but black is obviously a very important colour to you. Yeah. And I wonder what black signifies for you. What is it about? Is it just a uniform? Is it a way of hiding? What is it?
I make fun of myself as well, because...
And you have a daughter as well.
Yes, and my daughter makes fun of me actually better, because she likes colors, and rightly
Does
so,
she?
of course. But I think it's not a coincidence, particularly when I look at the Middle East. When I look at women writers, academics, journalists, I think many of us are trying to age as quickly as we can, because we come from societies that doesn't quite respect women until the day women are deemed to be old in the eyes of the society. Because patriarchal societies respect the matriarch in the family. We respect grandmothers, paternal grandmothers, maternal grandmothers, but other than that, we don't respect women in the public space. I really think it's not a coincidence that many women suppress a lot, either their femininity, or they try to dress up in more formal ways, or they choose the colors carefully. But it's not only happening in the Middle East, it's also happening in the world of politics. And one of the things we are doing, I think, is to suppress our emotions, because we have been taught that emotions are a sign of weakness. So we end up with female politicians because in order to prove how strong and resilient they are, particularly women politicians, suppress their emotions more. And I think that's also wrong. I sincerely believe in this age particularly we need to honor emotions more, and we need to put more emotional intelligence on the table. So I'm trying to embrace the things that for such a long time perhaps I too have suppressed, and I know I'm not the only one.
Shall we, before we open up to questions, shall we just there are a few passages I found in the book which relate directly to clothing and are absolutely wonderful passages. And I wondered whether you'd like to read them. I've marked them up, or whether I can read. I don't mind.
Yeah.
I don't mind at all. I just think you'd really enjoy this, because should I start with the belly dancing?
The belly dancing.
Layla as a belly dancer. And she's only 7, I think, at the time, and she's learning how to belly dance. Layla delighted in serving tea to her dolls, watching the trout swimming in cold water streams and staring at the patterns in the rugs until the shapes came to life. But most of all, she loved dancing. She longed to become a famous belly dancer one day. It was a fantasy that would have appalled her father had he known how thoroughly she'd envisaged the details, the sparkling sequins, the coin skirts, the clicking and clacking of finger cymbals, shimmying and rotating her hips to the rat-a-tat-tat of the goblet drum, the darbuka, charming the audience into a steadily rising synchronized clap, turning and spinning to a thrilling finale. Even the thought of it made her heart beat faster. But Baba always said that dancing was one of Shaitan's myriad time-honored tactics to lead humans astray. With heady perfumes and shiny trinkets, the devil seduced women first, weak and emotional as they were, and then, through the women, he lured the men into his trap. Wonderful writing, isn't it? And then there is another little bit too, which is just... I mean, it's interesting. Do you actually remember all these passages in your novels?
I do.
You do? Do you remember your novels well?
I usually do, and I love details. You know, when we talk about fashion, for instance, it's always, to me, rather than perhaps the dress, it's always the details, accessories. So mostly I remember these passages through the details, the trinkets, the sparkling bits, yeah.
Did you ever possess a sequined belly dancer's dress?
I'm not sure, I don't remember.
I bet your grandmother did.
Although, you know what happened? Because I went to primary school in Turkey, of course, and we would dress up. You know, I used to do the folk dance, and yes, we had these beautiful velvets. I always loved. I'm very interested in types of fabric, yes, and the names we give them in the Middle East, the brocades and everything. So there's a part of me that's very drawn to, you know, when I touch, how does it feel? I love those descriptions.
Well, there are many of them. I'm just going to make sure I go to the next one. You also talk about how clothes are political in this book too. So there's some very interesting passages about that.
If I may add, Rosie, I mean, all those details, I think that they're beautiful. If it's natural, if this is the way we want to dress up, you know, I love that. If it's imposed on people, I don't like it. And maybe one of the things that I found a bit difficult to cope, not only in Turkey, but also in Jordan, in different parts of the Middle East, sometimes, particularly women do this, we judge each other a lot, depending on how we dress up. And then it becomes, you know, what brand you're wearing, your bag. And I write about this with humor, again, in the previous novel, Three Daughters of Eve, because there are all these fake, you know, designer bags in Istanbul, which you can buy for very low prices, but it's a big, you know, profit-making machine industry. But all I'm trying to say is sometimes people judge each other a lot.
And of course, what does that tell our children? Because the children then, I mean, what kind of body image do...
Definitely.
You know, we're passing on all these bad aspects of appearance, really.
Yes, there was an interesting study, actually, among teenagers. On average, if they take, let's say, 300 pictures, then they delete 280 of them, and then they end up with those 20, and among those 20, they end up with 2. So what that means is, what is it about those hundreds of other pictures that they don't like? You know, what is it? Is it one pimple here, or they think, you know, they look fat in one picture? We become extremely judgmental towards ourselves primarily. This is how we regard ourselves in the mirror, that dominant gaze we internalize, and then we project it to each other. So we also start to judge our fellow human beings. Yes. And I think there's something extremely dangerous about that, because that perfection is not something we can attain. It doesn't even exist. And so this is a continuous state. It's a perpetual state of unhappiness that we're projecting and internalizing.
The wonderful thing about Layla, to end with, is that she, in spite of the extraordinary troubles she has, in spite of all the horrors that she encounters in her life, she is nevertheless, and in spite of the fact that she is dead, she nevertheless transcends all of that. And she is a wonderful, wonderful character. She's an unforgettable character. And it's in her childhood also that you see that gay abandon, if you like, that freedom that she encountered as a child. I know that childhood is very important for you, to look at how the children are, how they grow up in your novels. And of course, childhood is also very dangerous. And Layla herself, unfortunately, encounters that as well. But there are these moments here, and I just want to end if I may, with one final reading, which is also about appearance, if you like. It's about how we put on a uniform, we package ourselves. Nobody wanted to buy tomatoes that had been touched, squeezed, and sullied by other customers. Better if all the tomatoes in the market were carefully packaged and preserved. Same with women, the sheikh said. The hijab was their package, the armour that protected them from suggestive looks and unwanted touches. Mother and auntie, this is Layla's mum and auntie, had therefore started to cover their heads. Unlike most of the women in the neighbourhood, who closely followed the fashion in the West, their hair combed into bob-shaped bouffants, permed into tight curls, or pulled back into elegant buns like Audrey Hepburn's. While Mother had settled on a black chador when she went out, Auntie had chosen bright chiffon scarves, firmly tied under her chin. Both took the utmost care not to show even a strand of hair. Layla was confident that someday soon she would follow in their footsteps. Mother had told her that when that day arrived, they would go to the bazaar together and buy the prettiest headscarf and a matching long coat for her. And Layla said, "Can I still wear my belly dancing costume underneath?"
The first line that you read, actually, it has been actually said in Turkey, by a number of not only preachers but columnists, saying that just like fruits, tomatoes in the supermarket should be covered in a package, women need to be covered, whatever that means. I mean, these people really need to be reminded that women are not tomatoes. But that's the mentality that we need to fight against. And of course, the problem is we have these very ultra-conservative preachers who think they have the right to dictate how women should dress up, how many children women should have, whether women should have a right to have a career outside the house or not. They think they have the right to dictate these things, and every now and then they come up with these horrible ideas. This is one of the things that is actually can be found even in social media in Turkish, women being likened to tomatoes. Yeah.
There are no tomatoes or tomatoes out there.
tomatoes.
Let's bring the lights up and get some questions from all of you. Hi.
My name is Bilal and I'm 9 years old. And my question is, as a writer, how do you get so much inspiration?
That's a brilliant question. Right.
Wonderful question. I appreciate that.
How old are you?
9 years old.
9.
That's one.
Today. 9 today.
Today. Wow. Wow. Well, do you want to be a writer? Maybe. Depends what she says, yeah? Okay. Elif, how do you get your inspiration as a writer?
And I really want to thank you for asking the first question, because, that's a very brave thing to do. In many talks, nobody wants to ask the first question. I think you're a very brave young lady, and I appreciate the question. How do you get the inspiration? I think from life, everything and anything. Maybe the question that you just asked me is going to inspire me tomorrow. Something I hear, something I hear. So I think as writers, we need to be curious. We should not lose our curiosity. We need to be good readers, of course, always remain readers, but also good listeners. I try to listen to people a lot, wherever I go, and I listen to two things. Not only what they're telling me, but also how they're saying what they're saying, with what kind of energy, what kind of, what's the choice of words. So listening, reading, observing, and just remaining curious, asking little questions, and doing a lot of research, just trying to keep our mind open, and always remembering that we are students in life. Even when we graduate from schools, we're still students in this life.
Thank you very much. And Meg, is there one over here?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Nadia. I'm from Iraq. Everything you've said now, it just resonates with me. That's like everything I feel and my opinion about everything. I read your book, Three Daughters of Eve, and I was interested in the bit when Perry goes to Oxford. And I know that from her background that her mother was very conservative.
Yeah.
And she grew up to be very fundamentalist with her. And I was expecting to read something about her choice of clothing when she goes to Oxford.
Yes.
because I come from the same background like Perry.
Yeah.
So for me, when I was in Iraq, I was dressed in overcoat imported from Turkey, basically,
Yeah.
and hijab.
Yeah.
And I never questioned the way I was dressed there because that's how it was. My sisters, my aunts, my mom, so no questions there.
Yeah.
I came here and I had the freedom
Yeah.
to dress the way I want
Sure.
because I came here alone. And it took me almost a year in order to find the way I want to dress, the way I want to look like. So I was expecting that Perry would go through the same process when it comes to appearance. But that was, the novel did not have that bit. And being confused as she is, I thought that that will be part of it.
She was also confused about what she wore. Yes, she was very confused. This is Perry in Three Daughters of Eve.
True.
Yeah. And I talked to a lot of Syrian and Egyptian girls who've been into the same experience.
Yeah.
And we always talked about our choice of how we want to look like. And I thought like to ask you about this and to add probably the bit that was missing in the novel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate that you also shared with us your personal journey. Of course, in the book, Peri never wears a hijab, right? So she comes from a more secular background. Her father is a firm secular Democrat. The mother is more religious. But I guess one of the things that I wanted to explore in the book was these three girls. Yes, one of them, Mona, wears a hijab. Shirin is quite the opposite. As I said, she's very critical of all religions, but in particular, she's critical of Islam because of the lack of gender equality in the practice all across the Muslim world. So she wears, I guess, what a much more religious person would see as indecent clothes, right? She's very free. And Peri is the confused one. But I guess what I wanted to explore was, can they still be friends? Can they still be sisters? Can they find something in common? And this is a question that is very close to my heart because, again, I come from a country that is extremely patriarchal, very homophobic, very sexist. And every now and then, just to give you one example, a couple of months ago, they always try to come up with these horrific laws, and there's one in the book as well. So a couple of months ago, they tried to pass this law that suggested reducing the sentence of rapists of underage girls should the rapists agree to marry their victims. As if the rapist is doing a favor to the victim, right? So that's the mentality we're talking about. Against that kind of mentality, women of all backgrounds need to unite forces. Against sexual harassment on the streets, if we can't go on public transportation, I'm sorry, we need to talk about these issues. Some people get upset at me. In Turkey, they say, why are you talking about these issues? It's our reality. Many women don't feel very comfortable on public transportation. That is why, again, these very ultra-conservative legislators, they say, well, maybe we should have pink buses for women and we should have gender segregation. Gender segregation is not going to be the solution. We need proper equality in the public space.
And of course, it happened here very recently to two women on a bus in London.
Which is unthinkable and unacceptable, absolutely. So we need to claim the public space rather than to be driven out of the public space. But all I'm trying to say is there are so many areas in which women need to unite forces. And that's why I wanted to ask myself that question, can we be friends? Can we be sisters? Can we find what we have in common? And also, I honestly believe if all our friends dress up like us, if all my friends dress up like me, if all my friends think like me,
if you were to wear red,
if I were to wear red, I think that would be a very narcissistic existence. I would only be surrounded by my mirror image, and just hearing the echoes of my own voice is not going to teach me anything in life. That's why I really believe that in life, if we're going to learn anything at all, we're going to learn it from diversity, from differences, those interactions. And this is why living in a city like London is incredibly important, where we have that diversity, and we need to appreciate it, in my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, too. And down here.
Thank you. I guess what I'm going to say is twofold.
Can you hold it really close to your mouth? Thank you.
I guess what I'm going to say is twofold. One thing that just struck me through the recent conversations is I've also only recently moved to the UK, and I grew up in a very, very conservative, extremely conservative place. And the work of fighting for things, you can see the evidence of what actually happens on the other side of it when you come to the UK, and I'm sure that you recognize that. Because there's so much freedom here. And I think every foreigner comes here, and the first thing you go is, I'm almost shocked or taken aback by how much freedom is possible in the world. So that is always, whenever people, there's always people go on about things are overly politically correct these days, but there's always a pushback against activism. And when you come to the UK, you can actually see the evidence of what's happened by the predecessors, but in the rest of the world, very often the line is drawn a little bit further back. Now my question, which I, from a woman to a woman, is something that's a bit difficult and dear to my heart, is activism is really difficult, and very few people choose to be an activist. It's usually when no has been a very, very severe limiter in your world from a very young age, in a very severe manner. And I find that I struggle to speak to that voice that is constantly pushing, constantly fighting for other people's rights, for my rights, and then the voice that wants to make things and become soft and sensitive and absorb the information so that I can turn it into something else. And I haven't been able to reconcile those two spaces. And you seem to have managed that, and I would love to know if you have any advice or any strategies that you do to temper that.
Thank you very much.
What a beautiful question also. Thank you. I think many of us feel that way, don't we? I mean, we have those inner voices, and there are conflicts, or so we think, perhaps. I learned this when I experienced postpartum depression. Until then, I had always thought of democracy as an external concept. For me, it was always, all my adult life, I believed in liberal democracy, pluralistic democracy. I defended it, but it had never occurred to me that democracy could also be an inner concept. Now, what do I mean by that? I think when you go through a depression, for whatever reason, you fall down, and all your pieces are scattered, and you have to sit down and reassemble yourself. And maybe that's a golden opportunity to take a more honest and closer look at how we organize things inside, because we normally never do that, because we're always in a hurry, always in the company of other people, and we're doing fine, As long as we're doing fine, we never feel the need to examine that multiplicity within. But only when you go through some kind of hardship, some kind of depression or turbulence, let's say, emotional turbulence, those are the moments when we need to perhaps embrace the multiplicity within. And that period taught me a lot. For instance, I realized that there was no democracy inside me, and the part of me that was more into books and the intellect and writing, that was my monarch, and all the other voices I had suppressed. And I wrote about this in a book called Black Milk, and in that book there's a character called Mama Rice Pudding. She only wants to learn how to make strawberry jam and domestic life. I'd always belittle that side of me because it wasn't important. But when you go through depression, you also learn to embrace that side of you. So I guess all I'm trying to say is I think democracy should be both an outer and an inner concept. Then we feel more balanced. It's a struggle, it's a journey, it doesn't come easily. But with regards to activism, I think we are living in an age in which all of us need to become more engaged citizens. Because the freedoms that we enjoy them mostly thanks to the efforts of men and women who worked very hard for those rights. And we can't take it for granted. We can't say that, well, history always will go forward, because it doesn't. Country after country, Turkey, Hungary, Poland, Venezuela, Brazil, the list is so long, shows us that history can go backwards. Even in America. I mean, look at what's happening in Alabama, in Georgia, state after state.
Look what's happening in this country, too. I mean,
so we need it everywhere. We can't say some countries are beyond that threshold. And I think this is an important moment for global solidarity, but also for global sisterhood.
My name is Fadime. I've also been living in London since I was 8. And I just wanted to ask a quick question to Elif about her future novels. So you've lived in different political societies, different areas of the world. And I was thinking, I wanted to ask you, are you planning to reflect this to your future novels, the lives you've lived in different areas?
Again, a fantastic
Thank
question.
you so much. So did I get it right? Living in all these, having lived in different cultures, does it have, is it
You're a nomad,
shaping?
really, aren't you? You're a traveller. You've lived everywhere.
You know, James Baldwin used to say of himself, I'm a commuter, and he used to commute a lot. There's a part of me that feels that way. I think I am a commuter between not only perhaps cities or countries, but also languages, cultures. I pay attention to those words that can't be translated easily from one language to another. I try to follow those nuances. But in my heart, I believe we all have multiple belongings. And I think we live in an age in which we are constantly pushed into one singular monolithic identity or tribe. And I believe we need to resist that tide. We need to swim against that tide. So, of course, I'm an Istanbulite, and I think wherever I live, I will have Istanbul with me. But I also feel attached to the Balkans. Put me next to a Greek author. We have so much in common. Or anyone from Bosnia, Romania, Bulgaria, again, so much in common. But I also have so many elements in my soul from the Middle East. So Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Iran, again. But I'm a European by birth, by choice. Over the years, I became a Londoner, I became a British citizen, and it pained me when I heard Theresa May say what she said about citizens of the world or being citizens of nowhere. I think that's not true. I think we are, all of us, citizens of the world and global souls. So why can't we have multiple belongings? That doesn't mean you don't care about where you are. It doesn't mean you don't have emotional attachments. It just means you can feel connected to several things at the same time. And I think that's closer to our spirit and soul.
And that's what you write about as well, of course, you know. And was there a question here?
Hello. I don't mean to hijack this conversation, which is all about women and fashion and about identity and expression.
We were longing for a man to ask a question.
I've been to Istanbul several times, and I found it an absolutely fascinating city. But I'm wondering if you, and I observed not only what the women were wearing, but also what the men were wearing. And it seemed to me that the colors that the men had were mainly black and gray, and they were very muted. And I wonder what you can tell us about the identity that men have expressed through their clothes and how that works its way through the culture in Turkey.
Thank you so much. Such a great question.
Excellent questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
I'm sure so many of you have seen pictures of 1970s Afghanistan, Kabul, women, in very modern clothes walking on the streets, or pictures of Istanbul in 1960s, 70s, my mother's generation with their miniskirts. And when you walk around Istanbul today, I feel sad that a woman with a similar miniskirt can't feel around with the same kind of freedom anymore. So we have been going backwards. That's something we need to accept, understand, and fight against. On the other hand, these impositions do not only target women, they also target men, in my opinion. In other words, I think it's difficult to be a woman in a patriarchal society, obviously, but it's also difficult to be a man in a patriarchal society, because men are also unhappy, particularly if you're a young man who doesn't conform to the given description of masculinity or what a strong man, proper man should be like. If you don't match that description, your life can be very hard. And sometimes we women also shun young men who do not conform to that dominant masculinity. So that is why I think, again, a women's movement that goes hand in hand, not only with the LGBT movement, but also understands that this is not about men versus women. We need to talk about masculinity. We need to talk about the construction of femininity. What does that mean, those cultural constructs, how they can be straitjackets, particularly for younger people, and make them unhappy. These are difficult conversations that we need to have. If I may change it slightly, I experienced it firsthand when one of my earlier novels came out in Turkey. It's called The 40 Rules of Love. And the book, the Turkish cover, is quite pink, actually, because we use the color of the heart chakra, and that's a very bright pink. And when the book was published, particularly male readers in Turkey, they felt very uncomfortable carrying a pink book in their hands. So that went on for a month, and in the end we realized they had been covering the book with newspapers, plastic bags, as if it's a crime of evidence, you know, hiding it. And in a way to joke with our stereotypes with regards to not only gender but also colors, my publisher, we published another version for men who were not happy with the color pink, and that was smoky gray. But
what a shame! What a shame!
What a shame, because it's the color of our heart chakra. You know, we all have that color, that beautiful bright pink inside.
And in fact, pink is Layla's favourite colour.
Yes.
And this book cover should offend absolutely no one. It is truly, truly wonderful. We do have to stop now, but the conversation does continue. As you know, you're all welcome to come and share a glass of wine with us, come and talk to Elif. She's happy to sign your books, and there are lots of books for sale and lots of wine, lots of great conversations to be had. Before we thank Elif, I would like to thank Stephanie and Meg and Greg. It all rhymes. Stephanie, Meg and Greg. Thank you. And you'll be able to see a film of this interview later on our YouTube channel. It's called Fashion and Fiction with Elif Shafak. And we're being filmed tonight by Mihai, so very delighted to have you as well. So please, if you know people who weren't able to be here, do tell them that they'll be able to watch this later on. I would like you to all join me in thanking this amazing woman. She's not only has she given us hope tonight, she's a beautiful, wonderful person, a friend, a colleague, and an amazing writer. So Elif Shafak, thank you so much.